you, they're not very funny. They feel a little too real, right? Like the relatives showing up and you just want to cry on the stairs in the dark because you don't want them to be there. My name is Rory, and I am the discipleship pastor here at Compass, and I am excited to be out at the Roanoke campus today with my Roanoke people. We are in the middle of this series called Who Needs Christmas? And maybe at some point this holiday season, you have asked yourself that exact question: who needs Christmas? And in this series, we've talked about some different ideas, one of those being that the world needed Christmas, that there was a gap between us and God, and that we needed Him to come towards us. We talked about God. He needed Christmas. He wanted this relationship with us. He wanted to be with His creation so bad that He came in the form of a baby to be a human and to dwell among His people. And today, what we are going to talk about is not that God needs Christmas, not that the world needs Christmas, but actually that your neighbors need Christmas. Just to get a feel of the room, just by a show of hands, how many of you would say that you absolutely love the Christmas season? Like you just love it. You, on like November 30th, you are ready to start decorating the house. The tree is up. You have started putting wreaths on every door possible. Doors where wreaths shouldn't even go, like the bathroom door. There's no reason for one to be there. You just go Christmas crazy. Now, for the rest of us in the room, how many of you would say you, frankly, you don't love Christmas? You could take it or leave it. No one's going to be honest. I know that you people are in this room, that you don't love Christmas. Listen, it's okay. We still love you. I'm one of you people. I don't love Christmas. I don't hate it. I don't love it. And really, honestly, the reason I don't love it is because of the people who do love it so much, right? They drive you crazy by the time it's all said and done. Well, the interesting thing to me about Christmas is whether you love it or whether you're dishonest and won't say that you don't love it, Christmas just takes over. Right? You can't escape it. You could try, but you can't. You go, you know what? I got to get out of this Christmas-filled house, so I'm going to go to the grocery store. And guess who's outside shaking a bell asking you for your change? Santa Claus. You can't escape Christmas. It's everywhere you go. Now, whether you love it or you hate it, I think the truth is that we become infatuated with it. Right? And I have a few reasons that I think that happens. The first of those is that everyone loves babies. Right? How can we not love a story of 8-pound, 6-ounce, baby fat, chubby Jesus in his cloth diaper, hanging out with a bunch of baby farm animals in a barn? How can you not love that story? You know, actually, speaking of babies, my wife and I just found out that we are expecting our very first kid. Yes, we're super excited. It was not immaculate conception, but I'll spare you the details. But we are super excited. But let's be real, right? We love stories about babies. The other reason, whether you like love it or hate it, we all get stuck in this mode of hearing and singing Christmas songs. How many of you are already done hearing Mariah Carey's voice this holiday? Yes. Now the honesty is coming out. I love it. You know, the interesting thing, though, about Christmas songs is that most of them, at the center of them, sing about Jesus as the Savior, as this King. Right? Think about the song, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. What's the very next line? Someone shout it out. Glory to you, King. Are you sure? You guys didn't sound very confident about that. You're right. Glory to the newborn King. And it's interesting, during the Christmas season, people who are not even believers, people who have no faith at all, sing that song and declare Jesus as the newborn King. It's super fascinating. Christmas is also this one time of the year where everyone is pondering and thinking about there being a higher power in the world. Right? We all think this. We all have this moment where we go, well, maybe I'm not the most important thing in the world. And so the way we respond to that is we buy gifts for other people, for people that we love, people that we work with. We buy gifts and we celebrate, but we also hear these ancient stories about Jesus in a manger, and we wonder, man, how true is that story? Is God really so in love with His creation that He would come as a baby? Faith becomes a big topic during Christmas. Actually, according to an article by the Washington Post, they wrote that Americans say they are more open to hearing a message about faith at Christmas than at any other time of the year. This includes when the attacks of September 11th happen. This includes when someone has a new baby. This includes when any massive event happens. People are still more interested in talking about faith at Christmas than any other time of the year. So with all those things, I think Christmas becomes this interesting opportunity for us to have faith conversations, maybe more than we have before. And I think it matters because your neighbors might be in need of those conversations. See, I remember as a kid, we had this grumpy old couple that lived next door to us. Now, I can imagine living next to me growing up as a teenager is probably not the most enjoyable experience for anyone. But as I would even walk by their house, walk near the curb of the front of their lawn, they would come out, they would yell, they would do this to everyone, they would scream, they would tell people to get away from their house. It was the most terrifying thing as a kid. But looking backwards, I can kind of start to piece some stuff together. Right, during the holidays, they never had any family show up. They never went anywhere. They didn't have friends come over to celebrate with them. They were the one house on the block that didn't put Christmas lights up. And Christmas lights, whether you love them or hate them, they are kind of this symbol of anticipation, of joy, of excitement for the Christmas season, and they had none of it. They probably lived some sort of life without a full experience of love and a sense of community. Now, maybe for us, in a much more real sense, we have to ask the question, how many people will sit at home this holiday season without any real love, any real hope, or purpose? It's an interesting question for us to consider, which is why at Compass we believe this, that Christmas is a great time to love your neighbor. Now, this isn't the first time that you've heard this before, and maybe loving your neighbor just comes natural for you, right? You have great neighbors. You love them. They don't get mad at you when your kids ruin their lawn. They don't get mad and passive-aggressively post on Facebook about your obnoxious pets. They don't do anything. They're great. They help you out with your family. They're great. Or maybe you're in here and you're going, Rory, listen, I want to love my neighbors, but you don't know my neighbors. Like, they need Jesus, but I'm not even sure if they had Jesus, he would help them. Like, I get it, right? We all have them. We have either the great people or the crazy people. The people that make us go, I just wish they weren't my neighbor. But a question that I think we have to ask is, who is our neighbor really? Who is our neighbor really? Jesus, some years later, after he was a baby in a manger, would be asked this question, who is my neighbor, by this religious leader and teacher. Now, the interesting thing to note of this question is when someone who knows the scriptures or the Torah asks Jesus this question, it's somewhat of a loaded question because they have an answer built up in their mind. Who is my neighbor? And who is my neighbor is not a real question of who lives next door to me. It's really a question of who do I have to love? Who do I have to love? And so Jesus answers this man's question, but much like Jesus does, he doesn't answer it with an answer. He answers it with a story we've all heard, but I want to walk you through it just very quickly. Jesus says there was a man walking on a road between Jericho and Jerusalem when he falls into the hands of robbers and is beaten, bloodied, and left to die. And down the road, after this happens, comes a Levite, a priest, someone who is noble and of high honor, but is highly religious, comes down the road and sees this man. And Jesus says that this man just walks around him. Another religious leader comes down the road, sees this man, and Jesus says that this religious leader also just walked around him. Now, something interesting to note about this story, this road that Jesus is talking about is a very real road between Jerusalem and Jericho. And historians say on that road that a majority of it is anywhere from 15 to 24 inches wide. This is not a very big road. So as Jesus is telling this story, he says that a third man comes down this road, a Samaritan. And a Samaritan was literally the neighbor to the Jewish people. They were Jews, but not by religious affiliation, by ethnicity. And they were kind of like the neighbor who throws loud parties that you want to call the police on, but you don't want to have all the drama. The Samaritan comes down the road and sees this man, bloodied, abused, and he helps him up. He gets him some food at Chick-fil-A. He takes him to the ER. He checks him into the presidential suite at the Holiday Inn. If they even have presidential suites at the Holiday Inn at that time, I don't know. But he takes care of him. And Jesus, he ends this story and says, this man was a neighbor to this person. Now, the funny thing is, right, he's laying on a road that's no bigger than 2 feet wide. And Jesus consistently says that the people who come down the road, they do what? They walk around him. That's not even possible. You know, the only way to get around someone on a 2-foot road that's laying there and is bleeding out, you have to do what? You have to step over him. So here's the thing. For Jesus, your neighbor is not just the guy who lives next door. Your neighbor is anyone who is close to you but is far from God. Now, this may be your literal neighbor. This may be the man or the woman or the couple who live next door to you. It may be the person in the cubicle next to you. But for Jesus, it's anyone who is close to you but is far from God. Someone that is so close, the only way you could avoid them would be to step over them. Now, when you hear a story like this, you realize something. You realize that it is a spiritual impossibility to call yourself a follower of Jesus and not care about the things and the people that Jesus cared about. It's a spiritual impossibility. That may seem strong, but I believe that it's true. It just doesn't work. We can't say that we love Jesus and we follow Jesus and we're trying to live our lives like Jesus, but not care about the people and the things that he cared about. Now, even with saying that, though, that doesn't make loving your neighbor any easier. Right, let's be honest. We live busy lives. Maybe the reason you've always had a hard time loving your neighbor is because your life is busy. I mean, let's be honest. It's hard to think about loving and caring for someone outside of our family when we're just trying to find margin to love our spouse and our kids and those relatives that show up uninvited. Like we're just trying to figure that out, more or less love someone outside of that group. Maybe it's not the pace of life that keeps you from this, though. Maybe it's the Christian reputation. Like, we can be honest for a second, right? Christians don't always have the best reputation. The church doesn't always have the best reputation. And maybe you feel this anxiety about even saying to someone, hey, I want to help you, and it's because I think that Jesus has the answers. Man, I get that. Maybe it's just much more simple than that. Maybe it's just that we don't know how. Maybe it's that when it comes to loving our neighbor, we just get filled with questions of how do I do it? What do I do? How do I tell someone about Jesus? How do I help someone who is in front of me? How do I serve and love the person who is close to me but is far from God? And while I get all of those problems, what I want to do today is be super practical with you. I want to be really simple. I don't want to be like, I'm not going to try to enlighten you beyond your imagination. That's not my goal today. I just want to be helpful and try to answer the question of how do we love our neighbor well at Christmas? So I'm going to share with you 3 things. And the first thing that I think God may be calling us to this holiday season is to demonstrate kindness. To demonstrate kindness. You might be thinking, well, that's way too simple. But let's be real, right? Life is often really unkind. It's unkind. I don't need to give you clear examples, but I'm going to frame it for you. It's the kid at school who makes fun of every kid that is different from them. Your kid comes home and tells you about them. It's the driver who is so filled with road rage that they show obscene gestures to everyone that they can. It's the boss who shows no compassion for his employee's situation. It's that parent that you see in public putting down their kid. See, kindness, if we're honest, kindness is not normal. What is normal is negativity and blame. And negativity and blame are so pervasive in our world today. Everyone wants to talk about who is at fault for the world's problems, but I think what the church is called to remember is that God has called us to spread good and not spread blame. I love this quote that I heard recently. Every person has opinions on how to improve their world, though no one wants to practice kindness in their own backyard. No one wants to practice kindness in their own backyard. Paul, who is a writer in the New Testament, he was a servant of Jesus. He once wrote a letter to the church in Ephesus, and the book is titled Ephesians. And towards the end of his letter, he says this, Ephesians 4:32. He says, "Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you." So the Bible says that kindness, it's love in action. Kindness is a way of life that works for the good of another person, not for yourself, but for someone else. Sometimes it's demonstrated in ways as simple as just calling someone by their name, letting someone know that they are known and they are loved and they are acknowledged, that they are cared for. And sometimes it's meeting a real, tangible need, but kindness always makes a difference. Paul would later write in a letter called Titus, he would say, "But when the kindness and love of God our Savior appeared, he saved us, not because of righteous things we had done, but because of his mercy." Right? Kindness shows mercy. It's winsome. It draws people in. One, you may even be able to say that it pays to be kind. I heard a story recently. This woman, she was sitting at a bus stop and she had just gotten her tax return check back, and it was way more money than she expected to get. She wondered if TurboTax had messed up, which we all wonder when we do our taxes. And she had more money than she knew what to do with. And she looks over and she sees this man sitting on the bench with her, and he's not dressed very well. He looks tired, he looks burned out. And so she thinks, I'm gonna do something nice. And so she takes just a $10 bill and she slips some money in his hand. And she whispers into his ear, "Never despair, never despair." And the next day she shows back up at the bus stop, and this guy was there again. And he approached her and he hands her $110. And she says, What is this for? Why are you giving me this money back? And he looks at her and he says, "You won, lady. Never Despair was a great horse. Paid out 10-1. Now, let's be real. I can't guarantee that kindness pays out 10-1 or that you're gonna get $100 out of nowhere. But kindness pays, man. Kindness is beneficial for someone else, but what it ends up doing is actually changing our heart to look more like Jesus. I don't know if you saw this, but 2 weeks ago, actor Tyler Perry, he went into a Walmart and he paid off layaway purchases for 1,500 customers. It was wild. It was over $434,000 that he doled out to make this happen. And he tried to do it in secret, but the word got out of who it was. And when someone grabbed a hold of him and was able to interview him, this is what he said. He said, "I know it's hard times and a lot of people are struggling. I'm just really, really grateful to be able to be in a situation to do this. So God bless you. Go get your stuff." Now, what I love about this is that actually a week later, musician Kid Rock went to the local Walmart in his area and did the same thing. See, the reality is that kindness only produces more kindness. It's not self-centered. It's not a selfish act. It doesn't become a cul-de-sac. Kindness, once it happens, it should explode out into the world around us. I think this is true. I think this is why we have to recognize that kindness is possible from us, because first, God was kind to us. Paul would again write in the book of Romans, he says, "Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from sin?" See, God was kind to us even when we didn't know if we wanted his kindness. God was good to us even when we weren't sure if we wanted to receive it. Before you even existed, God was kind to you. And that can change everything about Christmas. See, the second step that I want to suggest for you this holiday season is to discover stories. If I can be honest for a second, I think where the church goes wrong with trying to help people or even trying to evangelize people is that we end up not really knowing anybody. We make generalizations and we make blanket statements. We're even guilty of this on stage. We say things like, oh, those people are broken, those people are lost, those people need Jesus. But the unfortunate thing about those statements is they don't actually prove that we know anyone. What it typically means is that that person doesn't dress like me, they don't think like me, they don't vote like me, they don't eat like me, they don't do the things that I do or see the world that I do, so something must be wrong with them. But here's the truth. The best way to actually get to know somebody is through learning their story. Do you know the story of your neighbor? The person who is close to you and to your heart but is far from God? Do you know their story? Do you know their background? Do you have any common ground with them? See, too often when we meet someone or we know someone who is hurting or is longing for purpose or is without a relationship with God, we go, hi, I'm a Christian and I go to this place called Compass and it's great and, oh, what are you wearing? Anyways, Jesus is awesome and you should come to my church, but oh, you drink alcohol? I'm so sorry. But Jesus is great. He can probably help you through that problem. Like we make it these massive generalizations and we spend so much time talking that we don't actually get the chance to hear anyone's story, right? You've all had this happen to you because communication, when done poorly, can become all about ourselves. You have that relative that you're gonna spend time with this Christmas where you are going to say how proud you are of your child and they are gonna say that they are even more proud of their multiple children because they've done things that are greater than your kids. We call these people story toppers and we all know one. If you don't, you are that person. We know this. We see this happen in communication all the time. And maybe it's not the story topper thing. Maybe it's when you're having a conversation with someone and you're going, okay, this person, they're looking to me for help. So I'm gonna spend the next 30 seconds that they're talking trying to think of something good to say back to them. And by the time it's your turn to talk, you haven't heard a thing. We've all had this happen. Communication can be so easily just become about us, and we spend more time talking than listening. And you will never know anyone's story if all you do is talk. See, for some of us this Christmas, I think we need to begin to ask people who they are before we tell them what we have for them. We need to get to know who they are before we even invite them to a Christmas service. So the challenge is real simple. Take someone out to coffee. Invite this family that you're thinking of. Invite them over for dinner or take them out to dinner, whatever you want to do. Maybe they don't know Jesus. Maybe they do know Jesus. Maybe they're just having a hard time. Get to know them. And if I'm honest, timing ends up being everything, right? I'm not asking you to like pop the spiritual question on the first date with somebody. I'm not asking you if you take them out to dinner and the waiter comes over and asks what they want to drink and they say, oh, I would just love some water. I'm not asking you to look at them and go, you know what else is important about water? Baptism. You should think about it. That's not it. If they say, you know what, I want some coffee, and the waiter or waitress brings them coffee and they go, be careful, the coffee's really hot. You look at them and go, you know what else is really hot? Hell. Or if they bring bread to the table, it is not your job to go, Jesus was the bread of life. Not your job. Your job is to get to know people so you can have deep, meaningful conversations about faith later on. It's not your job to Jesus juke them into faith. That's not what this is about. See, here's the truth. As important as it is to listen to someone's story, what might be important for you this Christmas is to actually share your story. Bobette Buster, who is a screenwriter and a story consultant, she says this when it comes to sharing our story. She says, we just need to do it. Dare to be personal, dare to be vulnerable, and dare to listen to others sharing their stories. There's a really easy way to do this. Maybe the idea of sharing your story is terrifying to you. You can't imagine what it would be like to just kind of lay it all out there for someone to see. But here's the truth. The easiest method of sharing your story is to be able to answer one question. How has Jesus changed you? Not how has Compass changed you? Not has becoming older and wiser changed you, but how has Jesus changed you? I first learned the power of story the first time I went through Rooted here at Compass. I was in a group with strangers, and it was my turn to share my story, and I shared it, and I didn't feel like I was being honest, and so later I shared it again, and I learned that vulnerability leads to life change in people. See, the truth is, around the age of 2, my parents separated and got divorced. I grew up as a kid my entire life who never understood what it meant to have a loving, caring father around. And by the time I was 18, I had experienced sexually broken relationships. I'd experimented with drugs. I'd been arrested multiple times, and I grew up disappointing people left and right. I grew up with this fear. Maybe it wasn't really a fear as much as it was just an assumption that I would inevitably be a failure. I grew up believing that if there really were a God out there in the world, why would he let me grow up without a father to love and to care for me? And even more so, if there was a God out in the world, how much of my failures could he really take? Because certainly at some point, even if I trusted him with my life, he would leave too. Now, when I met my wife and I fell in love, those fears, they didn't disappear. They actually, in some ways, grew stronger. See, my belief was not that just my father was a failure for abandoning his family, but that it was inevitable that I would fail as a husband and a father, and I would lose my family too. But when I went through Rooted for the first time, God changed me. I wasn't just reminded how good God was. I was reminded that God's heart for me is so big and so wide and so loving and so caring that my mistakes, my failures, the places I've fallen short don't even register for him. He actually believes in me probably more than I believe in myself. Now, you wanna know the power of listening to someone's story or sharing your story is you guys actually like me a little bit more right now. You guys now trust me because I've been vulnerable with you. I've shared with you not how great I am or how awful I am, but how good God is. You actually like me. Can you imagine what could happen over a dinner table if this holiday season you just sat with someone and said, I just want to tell you what Jesus has done for me? Not, hey, I've got this form that I'd love you to fill out and say you're going to get baptized later. Just look at what Jesus has done for me. I love what David writes in the book of Psalms, Psalm 107. He says, give thanks to the Lord for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Listen, if your life has truly been transformed by God, then this is easy. Share your story. But first, invite someone to share their story with you. Now, what if this Christmas, people didn't just walk away going, yeah, I showed up to church and I heard the Christmas story again, and it's always great. Jesus looks real cute in the manger. But they walked away going, man, I heard someone else's story this Christmas about how Jesus is so real for them, how Jesus has changed their life. I want what they have. I don't know what they have exactly, but I want what they have. I want to take a second because a lot of this message, it's church business in some way, right? We're hoping that you would love your neighbors so that you can invite them to church for Christmas Eve. But I realize that probably there are people in this room who maybe this is your first time at Compass, or you've been coming for a couple weeks and you're not sure about this Jesus thing, or maybe you are sure about this Jesus thing, but your life has gone through so much this season that you don't know if God is still good. You don't know if Jesus still brings hope for you. You don't know if God still offers peace for you. And all I want to say to you, that Christmas is for you as much as it's for anyone else. That God's heart for you is so big that the places that you feel like life has fallen apart, God is there to hold you together. God sent his son so that you would have peace. And on Christmas Eve, we're going to talk about that. What it means that God came for us and that Christmas is for us as well. The last thing I want to encourage you with to do this Christmas is to help people figure out their next step. The language we use here at Compass is to discern next steps. I read this great tagline from some church leaders who are doing a phenomenal job of reaching people and engaging with their community. And this is what they said. They said, found people, those people who God has reached and loved and saved and healed and restored and given new life, they say that found people find people. Found people, find people. That if God has awakened you to the beauty and the power and the truly good news of the gospel, you should automatically want to share it with those that are closest to you. Found people, find people. Found people, find people. So the question, who's the one person you need to find? Maybe you just need to get proactive this holiday season and extend kindness. Maybe to your literal neighbor. Maybe it's to the person in the cubicle over from you. Maybe it's your kids, teachers, whoever, that person that is close to you. Maybe you just need to extend kindness. Maybe you need to invite them out and you need to listen to their story. Maybe you need to share your story with them. And as you begin to hear their stories, it'll begin to peel back and you'll see scars and you'll see pain. Maybe you'll see joy. And you can begin to find healing. They can begin to find hope. Now, maybe you're thinking, I'm not super interested in this part of it. I'm an introvert. Just being at church for an hour is way too much energy for me. I don't want to go talk to people about my faith. It's a private part of my life. Here's the deal. God has blessed us and saved us and redeemed us and given us a story that matters. It's our responsibility to share it, to ask someone to be a part of our life. When you walked in today, either at the door or on your seat, there's one of those cards with Christmas times on it. They're invite cards. There's 3 of them. My hope, this is our hope across Compass, is that 100% of the people in this room would invite one person to Christmas Eve service this year. Just one person. I'm not asking you to invite your whole office. I'm asking you to invite that one person. The person who is close to you but is far from God. The person who is close to you but is hurting. The person who is close to you but needs hope. We want you to invite them to Compass for Christmas, not because we think Compass is the greatest thing in the world, but because we think Jesus is the greatest thing in the world. And what he offers to people at Christmas can change their lives. We want you to pray for God to give you just one person to invite. Invite your neighbors, your friends, whoever. But don't just give them a card. Tell them why it matters. Tell them why Christmas matters. Tell them your story. Maybe you go around your neighborhood. Maybe you give out cookies to your neighbors. I really don't care how it happens. But reach out to your neighbors. The people who are close to you but are far from God. There was an article recently in the New York Times about a family, the Allen family in Cincinnati, who decided to celebrate Christmas in September. You Christmas people are like, yes. They were doing this, though, because their 2-year-old son, Brody, had a rare form of cancer and wasn't going to make it to Christmas. So they decided they would celebrate in September. The problem is that in September, there's not really any Christmas decorations for sale yet. They're not out at the store. And so they created this Facebook page and they asked their neighbors for help. And what happened next was awesome. The neighbors all around them gave decorations to help the Allens decorate their home, but they also decided to take down all their fall decorations and decorate all of their homes super early for Christmas as well. But that wasn't the only thing that they did. The neighbors, they sent gifts and snacks and cards to Brody. They planned a Christmas parade. And they did it because they wanted this little boy to experience one last Christmas. Now, in the article, some of the neighbors were interviewed, and what they said was telling. One neighbor said, "We needed to get involved because he lives in our neighborhood. And we just wanted to do something that makes this really special for them because we know that they're going through a hard time." Man, what a powerful statement. We needed to get involved because he lives in our neighborhood. See, these neighbors got involved because they realized that this little boy who lived down the street needed Christmas. Now, you may not know someone who is dying, who may not even make it to Christmas, but we know people who are without hope, who are without joy, who are without love, who are without community, who are longing for something greater in life. And this Christmas, we can change that, because when we realize that we need Christmas, we know that God needs Christmas because he loves us. We then have to know that our neighbors need it too. Let's pray. God, we are thankful for who you are. God, whether we're in here and we love Christmas or we could just skip straight to January, God, we ask that in the next couple of weeks, God, in the next few days, you would give us one person to share our story with. You would give us one person to demonstrate kindness to. You would give us just one person that we could love well. God, we ask that you would give us one person that we can invite to Christmas at Compass. Not because Compass is amazing, but because we believe Christmas Eve here will be amazing because it celebrates the story of Jesus. God, remind us of how much we need this and how much our neighbors need it too. God, we trust you with all of this. It's in your son's name we pray.